Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the Experts here on City News 570. I'm joined today by Faisal Susiwala, recently named as the #1 REMAX agent worldwide in terms of sales volume and number of homes sold. And we've got him on the show today. Welcome back to the show, Faisal, and thanks for giving us some of your time today as well.
Thanks for having me on, Brock.
Listeners, if you're interested in any of the information we discussed over the next hour, please reach out to Faisal. You can start your journey at homeshack.com. You can also call him directly, 519-624-5555, or by email, faisal@homeshack.com. To start off, right off the top, Faisal, it finally happened. We've been sitting around waiting for this to happen for a while. And that first rate cut was announced last week. What does that mean? We can all breathe a sigh of relief. We can all jump right back in the game. What's happening?
Well, it's fantastic news. We anticipated this. You and I have talked about it for the last few months. And, many were expecting the rate cut to start in the July 24th or the August or September Bank of Canada announcement. But the trend was really headed towards a June cut. And we've talked about the overcorrection the Bank of Canada had made leading up to this. And if they didn't do something now, I think it would have been too little too late. So I'm glad they made the decision to do that. We have now seen those who were sort of in the sidelines, waiting to see what's happening, really start looking at jumping back into the market. Last weekend, we noticed a significant uptick in the activity in our region. Homes that were sitting on the market for 3-4 months, all of a sudden started getting offers on them. So that's a pretty good sign that there's some life in the market once again, and we're going to see some activity, positive activity, both for buyers and sellers.
I was going to say I noticed a lot more signs that that are popping up, and a lot of for sale signs and the sold signs not taking as long to get on the tops of those signs as well too. And as you said, people have been on the sidelines and maybe holding their breath for a little bit and waiting for that initial drop of 0.25. Will this, in your mind, is it a snowball effect, or is it still a little bit of wait and see?
Well, there's still a little bit of wait and see. There's no question. But here's the caution that I'd put out there on the wait and see approach. With the wait and see, we know from historical patterns, especially of 2022, where as soon as rates started going down, prices started going up. And it's a fair argument to say, well, it's too expensive at the rates that we are at, even with a 1/4% or 0.5% drop, for me to jump into the market. But what one should really be considering is, what is the benefit of paying a higher interest rate today, perhaps for 1 or 2 or even 3-year terms? Um, and what is the savings from the perspective of purchase price? So, as an example, yes, you may pay $12,000 more in annual interest as a result of locking into a 2-year term at 5.9%, let's call it, as opposed to waiting for the rate to drop to 5%. In this situation, the cost of the purchase is going to be significantly lower than what it would be if you wait until the rate is 5%. So yes, you'll get a lower payment by waiting until it's 5%, maybe a year down the road. But if we look at what the trend was in the past, every 1/4% rate reduction translated to about 2.5 to 3% price increase.
Okay.
And if you look at the average price point in our communities, let's call it $8. Well, 3% is $24,000. If you take 3 cuts over the next year, that's $75,000. Even at a $12,000 higher interest payment, and I'm saying that broadly, it may not even be that much. You're still having a massive amount of savings by buying now, locking in short term, getting that cost savings on your purchase. We will see some strengthening in the market over the summer, and then we might see some softening coming into the fall as a result of rate renewals. As we all know, we're facing those coming up.
Yeah, and I think we had talked last time too that there's some the rumblings out there that by the time we get to 2026, 2027, we may see those home prices jump back up to where they were when we hit that February of 2022. And it, as you're saying, right now the price is reasonable. The payment, it's there's still a little bit of sticker shock there. But as we've said many times before, it's a long game. So if you're getting into a home, let's say it's 700,000, and then 3 years down the road, it's pushing up to that 850 or 875 mark. You've got to be able to weigh both of those options, and I think it's important if people want to reach out to you and say, look, Faisal, what's the best way to go? You've got the information, and you've been doing this for a while as well too.
Yeah, and I'm happy to take those calls and give the best advice that I can. It's important to realize that sometimes taking that contrarian approach when everyone else is exiting, it may be a chance for you to enter. It's risky. It takes a lot of stomach to handle the ups and downs of those markets. But I've always found in my career, at least, where I've seen those trends, and following the masses is not always the right approach when it comes to real estate.
Good advice. Uncle Faisal is always coming through with that great advice. Before the show, Faisal, we were talking off the camera about that idea of you've seen a lot of changes in how homes have been purchased, especially even going back 5 years ago, where we know that things might be a little bit more challenging for younger people. So you've seen that idea of parents and children, adult children, sort of coming up with a deal. What do you see happening?
Yeah, I'm seeing several changes in how homes are being purchased, especially today compared to even 5 years ago. With the skyrocketing home prices, particularly in expensive markets like Ontario, young adults cannot afford to buy homes without parental help. So parents and children are creating shared equity deals to jointly purchase property. As an example, I recently helped a family buy a condo where mom and dad came in at a 75% interest. The kids came in at a 25% interest. Now, the ownership is split that way. Essentially, what's happening is mom and dad are giving the kids their inheritance in advance in some cases, and having the joy of watching their kids sort of live. And maybe if it's a home and it has an in-law suite, they can live there during the summer months and then go back to Florida during the winter months. But we are seeing now that a sizable portion of Gen Z homeowners, in fact, is 38%, receive financial help from their parents. So baby boomers who have more wealth are often aiding their children to get into home ownership because the kids are burdened with student debt, other debt that they've had over the years because of cost of living and just the overall expenses of life. So these agreements and arrangements should always be papered. There should be some legal understanding, legal paperwork, so that there's no confusion on what the intent of those equity ownerships were. It doesn't become a an issue upon death of the parent, because one
Mm.
sibling may say, hang on, I didn't hear anything about this mom and dad giving you 25% of your down payment, or that should have been part of your inheritance. Where's the documentation on that? Why am I still splitting the balance of my inheritance with you when mom and dad already gave you that money? So there has to be clear understandings, and papering it amongst family. It doesn't matter. The handshake deals are great when everybody's alive and well, but the handshakes don't come in very handy when you're not around to disclose what the arrangements and the intent of those arrangements were.
I would think too, in this day and age, that from a legal perspective, lawyers are maybe spending a little bit more time, working around those scenarios where it might not be a 50-50 split. Maybe it's a 60-40, or as you were saying, a 25-75 split. Because it's a way to get your foot in the door. And as you're saying, make sure that because nothing tears apart a family more than money when it comes to when you're dealing with the death of a parent and having to go through all of those pieces. Make sure you've got everything in place.
Yeah, sadly, part of my career at this stage in life is dealing with a lot of my clients who have passed on. And it is very, very saddening to see the impact on the family dynamics when the last family member has passed on. The inheritance is going to the kids, and there's that infighting, and there's no understanding as to what happened. Everybody was getting along really well when mom and dad were alive, but there wasn't clear instructions on who was entitled to what, and for that reason, rifts have been formed and families have been broken up over it.
Good idea to get your homework done and always consult the lawyer as well too. We're coming up on a break here and Ask the Experts. When we come back, debt is more than just a four-letter word. Stay with us here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Faisal Susiwala, recently named as the #1 Remax agent worldwide in terms of sales volume and number of homes sold. He's also the author of the book, The Real Deal: $1 billion Real Estate Broker. Faisal is here. We started to talk about different ways that people are trying to find a way to get their foot in the door when it comes to home ownership. So, listeners, if you've got any sort of question at all, and you want your chance to chat with Faisal yourself, start off. You can go to homeshack.com. You can also call Faisal directly, 519-624-5555, or through email, Faisal@homeshack.com. So, a couple of things we want to talk about in this section, Faisal, the idea of maybe we've got inflation sort of reined in a little bit, and also that idea of debt. They always go hand in hand. What are you seeing happening when it comes to inflation and where we happen to be at this moment?
Well, with all the correction measures that Bank of Canada has taken, it has assisted in getting our spending under control. So recent decline in consumer spending data was just published by TD Bank and RBC, and TD Bank came in at a 0.1% reduction in consumer spending. RBC came in at a 0.2% decrease. May not sound like big numbers, but it's significant enough to show that we are tightening our belts. We are not spending the way we used to. Retail spending per person has been declining for the past 2 years, and overall sales have gone down in the retail sector. So we're seeing that happen. So the government's idea of reducing spending, getting inflation under control has certainly started to work. Um, Credit card debt is still increasing. We're seeing that throughout our communities. Weak retail sales will continue to support the Bank of Canada's case for cutting interest rates. So if everybody goes on a shopping spree all of a sudden because the rates have gone down, we're probably going to see some stabilization in those rates again, say, oh, you know what? Okay, you guys are out of control. We're going to punish you again by increase the rates because you didn't learn your lesson the last time. So this is it's a balance that we have to see, but we have to continue watching our spending. The stronger than expected job numbers could reduce the rate
Mhm.
cuts as well. So we have to watch that. So it's not just all about interest rates. It's a lot about it, but not all of it. So the job numbers have been coming out and they are stronger. So I don't think it will stop. It may defer the rate cuts. Maybe, we expect one July 24th, another one September 4th, I believe it is. So as those dates are coming up, very important to watch the job numbers as well, not just what's happening on our inflation numbers.
You bring up a good point to that idea of sort of spending is getting kind of reined in, and I don't always like to bring this up, but that idea, I think back to during the pandemic, for example, where it was sort of like we were all forced to not make purchases because we couldn't be out of our homes and everything else. And I think there was this sort of shift in a lot of our mindset where it was, let's spend more time. And it's the time that we're spending. So it's experiences, it's going for walks, it's getting together, maybe for a coffee or having people over to the home and those kinds of things. Those things don't usually cost us a lot of money, and we're always trying to find that balance. Maybe there was a bit of a slingshot when things did open up again, but I think people are realizing if I want to be able to afford mortgage and groceries and gas, I do have to hold that spending on those things. We talk an awful lot with young people about that idea of spending money on things that are consumable. So gasoline, groceries. At the end of the week, both of those things are gone, right? And yet we're still spending money on them. Make sure you're getting a deal on your groceries. Make sure you're clipping those coupons. These are all things that our parents and grandparents did, and they seem to be doing okay at that point. I think we can always, even though we're always looking ahead, it's a good idea for us to take some time to remember what got us here and sort of those rules from the past that we can hang on to as well.
Yes, I totally agree. The spending the money on experiences over goods is always recommended.
If we go the other way, and I'll be devil's advocate here, and if we take a look at taking on too much debt, if we're going to be going that direction. I know you had sent some documents over to me to take a look at earlier, and Ontario is leading the way when it comes to taking on too much debt. You've got a lot of experience with this. What should people be doing, and what are the not to do's as well?
Yeah. Ontario is the clear winner. We're leading the path in Canada as the highest debt population, and out of that, Barrie, Ontario, is leading the chart for us in Ontario as the highest average credit card debt per capita at $3,500. And the other top 10 are, St. John's, Toronto, Peterborough, Kelowna, Brantford, Kingston, Calgary, Thunder Bay, and Hamilton throughout Canada. But seven of the 10 top debt regions are located in Ontario. And this is a real issue because we are living in a society of instant gratification
Mhm.
where we will use our plastic, buy it now. But if you don't have a clear plan on how to take care of that debt at the end of the month, over the next 3 months, over the next 6 months, you're signing yourself up for a lot of other bad things to happen to you, including the inability to get rental housing because you are late on your payments or you've accumulated too much debt, the inability to get financing because you appear to be someone who relies heavily on credit card debt for day-to-day survival. So if you're using your credit card in your grocery stores and your gas and whatnot, and you're not paying it off monthly, it almost looks like you're relying on this as a way of life, not as a convenience factor to take care of at the end of the month. And it shows the banks and your lenders and your landlords that you are not responsible with your money, and you're almost looking at a minimum payment lifestyle, which
Mhm.
no one is really interested in partnering with you on if that's the approach that you're going to take. So it's extremely risky to use credit cards for immediate expenses without that repayment plan. And we have to look at that cycle that you could fall into of just multiplying that debt monthly. So it's 3,000 this month, 6,000 next month, and you're making your minimum payments. It is very difficult to get out of that vicious cycle if you don't have a plan on how to pay off that debt on a regular basis.
And we know it you can't get ahead of it. It's like a wave and it just keeps growing behind you and you can feel it. It's always there. I know one of the key things that we do as a family, my wife and I do, is every month we check our credit score. And I think that's always a good idea, especially if you're using credit cards or you're looking at, and it allows you to take a quick look and see, where are your credit cards at, and making sure that there aren't any strange sort of things that are appearing in your credit score. Is that advice that you would give to other people as well too, Faisal?
Yeah, keep up on it so you know what your snapshot is like before someone's telling you, and you're making conscious decisions. And by being aware of your credit situation, your financial situation, your debt and your asset situation, you're going to make far more responsible decisions when you see that item that you gotta have. You're like, maybe I'll put this off for a bit because I gotta fix my score, or I gotta get my debt under control again. So that whole instant gratification thing needs to be put aside a little bit. There's nothing wrong with making sure you know exactly where you stand on a financial basis on a regular time frame like that.
And what I say to a lot of people, and when I mean people, I mean my own kids, the idea that those things will still be for sale the next time you go looking. There's always something for sale. It's never they're not going to run out of cars or stereos or phones or anything. It is that idea of avoiding the fear of missing out. It'll still be there if you wait another 4 or 6 months and have that money in your pocket to make that purchase.
It,
That's
it will,
that's
yeah.
that's my age coming through, but that's okay too.
I'm right there with you, Brock. Now I'll tell you one thing that I do want to caution folks on is many of us have mortgages and we have lines of credits that as you pay down your mortgage, the line of credit available to you increases. So
Right.
often we look at those and you say you might have, if you have rental properties, and I look at mine all the time, and I have several rental properties, and I'll see, wow, there's quite a bit of available credit on my line of credit side. So the temptation is always there to say, well, if I take 10,000 from this one and 10,000 from this one and 10,000 from this one, all of a sudden you have a $50,000 lump sum that is in your rental property line of credits. And you're thinking, well, this is a good thing because the income that's coming will offset the
Right.
payments that I have to make on those lines of credit. I have a chunk of $50,000 in my hand now, and I can go on a little shopping spree or buy things that I want to buy or whatever it is that I want to do with that money. Here's the caution that I have, that when you start withdrawing that in a short period of time,
Mhm.
your credit score gets impacted negatively because it looks like you're out there and you run out of money and you're chasing, you're getting 10 from here and 10 from here and 10 from here, not because there's no way of explaining to the credit score gods what your intent was, and you've
Right.
just taken all this money. So I just recently experienced that with a client. They were good to go, everything was fine. They went to the bank to qualify for their mortgage and said, we got to decline you because your credit score is really low, which is really odd
Oh,
because
wow.
you've got great income, you have lots of assets, yet your credit score is low because you look like you're a credit shopper. And that's
Right.
very important to realize not to do that.
All right. Good piece of advice as well, too. We'll take a quick break. We'll get an update from the City News 570 News Center. When we come back, financial literacy is on its way to the province's classrooms. Stay with us here on City News 570. Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Faisal Susiwala, recently named as the #1 REMAX agent worldwide in terms of sales volume and number of homes sold. And so he knows what he's talking about. If you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can start by going to homeshack.com. You can also call Faisal directly, 519 624 5555, or through email, Faisal at homeshack.com. Some welcome news, Faisal, and we were talking about this off air. The idea of bringing financial literacy back into the province's high schools and sort of boosting and building on the knowledge that students might have already. And maybe I'll get your advice. What are you thinking about this sort of this sort of program?
Well, I'm very excited to hear about this. And in fact, we were talking earlier that, back in 2020, when I was writing my book, I have a full chapter in there talking about the need for financial literacy, to get it back into schools, to lobby our governments to get this in. So hearing this was certainly music to my ears. My understanding, and again, Brock, you would probably know better than me being in the school system, that the 2025-2026 school year, the graduating classes then will have to have this as part of their curriculum. And the component will be added to grade 10 math, is what I understand, with the high stakes test beginning in September of 2025. So the education minister, Lecce, has emphasized the importance of having those financial skills, which is good acknowledgement from the government because it has stopped. And, maybe Prime Minister Trudeau can sit in on one of these classes as well. A little dig there. Anyways, I would say that this is very welcome news. The students, I think, have to score 70% or higher
Mhm.
order to
That's
advance,
right.
or they take a retake test and enroll in a credit recovery course. So, I think they've set out a very good roadmap to achieving some form of basic financial literacy for young people. The other welcome news there was bringing back home economics, cooking, nutrition, changing a tire, sewing. I didn't realize that all of this had disappeared from high schools. This is kind of news to me. I know my kids didn't take those courses, but I just thought they elected not to take those. But auto mechanics, woodworking, even in mid school, having cooking, home ec, I think is what they used to call it back in the day, and sewing and whatnot. I think these are great skills, life skills to have, and certainly saves you from having to pay big money to get those things done if you can learn how to do it at home.
I was talking actually today with a student, and he was talking about, well, what did you learn in high school and what was important to you? And I said, you know what, probably the course that I took that gave me the most bang for my buck, if you want to call it that way, was grade 9. I remember taking a business course, and basically it was typing. And at the time,
Yes.
you sat in a room with it, and now I'm aging myself, but sat in a room with a bunch of typewriters. But learning keyboarding skills at that age, I still use them today, and it was one of the best courses that I took. Same idea. Great at the end of high school, taking like a food and nutrition course, learning how to make more than just hot dogs and craft dinner, and finding ways to because you've got to be taking care of yourself. I think you're absolutely right. This idea of building into the system, making sure that students are financially literate, because I think you and I have talked about this before as well too. Coming from, from the generation that I'm from, in my mind, the finances were always something that was my father's business, and I didn't really ever get an understanding of what it was all about. I remember asking him about, well, how much had you paid for the house, and what was your mortgage payment, and those kinds of things. But I really had to do the digging. It wasn't just kind of being shared with me, and I'm thinking a lot of other people my age might have been in the same sort of situation as well.
Yeah, and they are in the same. It's almost like a taboo to discuss your finances with your kids. And I think we have to break that pattern and really get them involved because A, you're giving them life skills, and B, you're making them very mindful and conscious of what it takes to operate a home, and that it's not just the lights don't magically come on or magically turn off. In my case, with my kids, I'm always yelling at them to turn the lights off. So it's important to understand, that yeah, when that toilet keeps running, that's pennies going out the door every second because you're paying for that water bill, your consumption cost, and your waste charge. So it's all those little things that we take for granted, or our kids will definitely be taking for granted because they don't understand the economics of running a household.
Good information. And I think someone at the Ministry of Education must have read your book and said, Faisal says we need to get this back into the education system. So we can thank you for that, Faisal. And if
But
it
I'm
didn't
gonna have a
happen,
lot of high school kids not liking me after that because it's like
that's okay.
one more course to pass.
And on maybe on a more serious note, in some ways, the idea when we're looking at home ownership and that being our castle, and we've talked about that before, um, we know that it keeps coming up in the news. Thefts and break-ins have become an increasing problem in a lot of our communities, and I know that that weighs heavily on you in the role that you're in. What if you're giving advice to people? What's the best advice to sort of fail safe your home for dealing with those kinds of situations?
Well, right now we're seeing, sadly, more and more, not just break-ins to steal your television, but break-ins to steal your cars. And
Yeah.
instead of just, using sophisticated tools to unlock your car door and break into it and drive away with it, the thieves are getting pretty bold and they're knocking on your door or knocking down your door, breaking your windows, and entering your home. In fact, recently, after this string of car thefts and whatnot, I actually called a security glass company to come in and give me a quote on putting sort of this shield or clear coat on my windows.
Mhm.
What I was, disappointed to learn in this is that by putting this film, which was very costly, it ran on average $400 to $500 per window, to put this film on my glass, it would only deter the theft from breaking the glass for about a minute to a minute and a half. And after that, they could penetrate through the glass.
Yeah.
What's worse is, and the gentleman who was selling me the film, he didn't do a very good job because he said, well, if the thief knows what he's doing, he could just break the frame and then he wouldn't have to worry about going through our shield. I'm like, okay, well, that makes the decision very easy for me. I don't have to worry about buying this because I'm sure a sophisticated thief knows that if he can't get through the film, he'll just break the frame. So
Right.
some ways to really safeguard, security systems with cameras, alarms, motion sensors, reinforcing your doors and windows with strong locks and security bars in some cases, if you have a walkout basement that's easily accessible. Keeping your home well lit. I make a practice of having my driveway and my front of my home well lit so
Mhm.
that we don't have darkness or bushes or anything where people thieves can hide. Keep So considering having a dog,
Oh, yeah.
great companion, and makes a lot of noise when some unwanted stranger or unknown person approaches the house. And making sure to secure your valuables in a safe or hidden location. And lastly, a lot of young people and a lot of people in general like to flex what they have, and they're
Right.
posting their jewelry, their watches, their cars, their purses, all the nice, valuable things that they have. Even, when you're going away, you may want to wait on posting your
That's right.
holiday pictures until you've come back from your holiday, not in real time while you're on holiday, because you're letting thieves know that you're not around. So these are all ways of just safeguarding yourself a little bit. Look, there's a lot of bold thieves and violent theft that is happening right now. So we can only do so much. And I say this to my kids, and I know there's a lot of controversy over this, but I say this to my kids all the time that if someone, tries to carjack you while you're driving, don't try to be a hero. Don't get in their face. Give them the keys. You're insured. Give them $20 for gas so they, can fill up on the way out, and leave it at that. Do not try to fight these people because you don't know who's on the other end and what they're armed with.
Right. And your life is worth more than that vehicle, right? That vehicle can be replaced. Those items can be replaced. That cell phone can be replaced. You can't be replaced. And those are the things we as dads, we stay awake at night sometimes thinking about those things.
Absolutely. Yes.
Listen, we'll take a final break here on Ask the Experts. When we come back, retirement. Now, that's not a four-letter word, and it might not be too far off for some of you. How much are you going to need in the bank? You're listening to Ask the Experts here on City News 570. Awesome. All right. One last section here, then, Faisal. I'm just going to pull that up and stop and reset there. So here I've got section 13. Folks are getting ready to retire. Either taking the lump sum payment or the monthly payments, what makes more sense for people. And then, also at the same time, that idea of estate planning, number 17. What are the kinds of things that people need to have in mind when that's kind of the next big decision that people need to be making
Okay.
out of
So
those
13,
13 and
the
17?
second one is 13 and sorry, was
17 for the second one.
17 and 13. Gotcha. Okay. Good.
All right. And then that'll take us to the end here. All
Okay.
right. All right. So here we go. Last section, fourth section, coming down in three, two, one. Welcome back to the show. My guest today, Faisal Susiwala, also known as the top real estate broker in the world for REMAX. Listeners, if you'd like a chance to chat with Faisal yourself, you can start by going to homeshack.com. You can also call Faisal directly, 519-624-5555, or email Faisal at homeshack.com. Faisal, you and I have spoken about this, and in my mind, it's just a couple of years down the road. And for other people, it might never happen. That idea of retirement, and if you're looking at you've got a couple of options when it comes to retirement. Maybe there's a lump sum payment coming your way, or maybe you're looking at taking a monthly payment. Maybe can you walk us through what makes the most sense for people when they're starting that next phase in their life?
Yeah, many folks are retiring very, very soon. And so like I like to look at an example so it makes a lot more sense. So, let's say your retirement pension is $400,000 if you take a lump sum versus $2,000 a month if you want to just take the payments until the end of your life. So it's a little bit different, and it all comes into life expectancy or your lifespan. So let's just say, and they say that the average life expectancy for a 60-year-old man today is 83, and for a woman, it's 86. So if we take that scenario, the man would have $432,000 if they took the $2,000 a month instead of taking the lump sum of 400,000. And the woman would have 504,000 if they took the 2,000 a month. Now, in the lump sum investment scenario, a $400,000 lump sum actually is 300,000 after you pay the taxes because you're taking it up front.
Yeah.
If you invest that at 7% annual return and you take $2,000 per month out as your investment return, then you are going to be ending up with $91,000 at the age of 83 at the end and 32,000 at the age of 86. So if you calculate all of this at the end of the day, the lump sum is more valuable if you live to age 87. Now, monthly payments are better if your life expectancy is to go beyond 87. And as medicine and we're seeing life expectancy and lifespans are longer. So
Hmm.
if you're 50 today, these numbers may not apply, but because by the time you're 60, let's hope you have a long life and maybe the life expectancy is going to be 95, in which case this whole scenario is different again. So but I like the idea in some instances of having the lump sum, investing it strategically, and it all comes down to how financially literate are you? How well do you manage your finances? Do you have other sources of income? Do you have real estate assets? Do you have stocks, bonds, insurance policies that are paying you out? So if you have RSPs and other things, maybe just having the additional $2,000 a month is sufficient. If you don't have these things, then you may want to look at taking the lump sum, putting it in something that gives you a higher rate of return and also protects your initial investment. And that lump sum amount continues to stay in an account, accumulating interest for you.
And I think, when we take a look at retirement at 60, at 65, there's still a lot of life to be lived, and a lot of people will have that retirement, but then they're not ready to sit in a rocking chair. They've got that side hustle, they've got that part-time job, they've got something that keeps them going. It's not as rigid or as structured as it was when they were working full-time, but there's a little bit more of a cash flow coming in, and it gives them flexibility. Maybe they want to travel. Maybe they've got some of those other things as well too. And I mean, I take a look at you, for example, Faisal, and I can't imagine you just coming to a full stop and saying, "No, I'm done. I sold the business. I'm just going to sit around." That it wouldn't happen. It would last for maybe an hour, and then you'd be twiddling your thumbs and ready to pick up again.
Absolutely. I don't know how to do nothing, so you have to do it. And, today we're seeing that, it all comes down to what your lifestyle is. If you can live off of a certain amount of money and you budgeted your life accordingly, then that's great. You can, but if you haven't, and we've talked in a previous show where, the average person retiring should have the equivalent of up to $2 million in their account if they're accustomed to living a lifestyle that requires $100,000 a year to live off of. Because
Right.
that $2 million at 5% return will give them $100,000 to replace their lifestyle income to sustain the life they have without having to downsize their home, their travel, their dining, their entertainment, and any of that stuff. So really think about what your pre-retirement lifestyle is and what you are willing to give up or not give up in order to make the decisions on how much it is that you need to have as fixed savings in order to earn a decent return on.
And that's a great point because I think a lot of people find themselves in that situation where, retirement comes and they haven't really done a lot of planning as to what it's going to look like afterwards. And as you're saying, what are you expecting to do? Are you still going to be traveling as much? Are you still going to be, driving those two vehicles? And that you do have to take a little bit of time to adjust maybe those expectations as well too along the same line, and not to get morbid or anything like that, but when it comes to estate planning, which is also part of that whole piece of when you're retiring and you're moving along, it can be daunting, I think, for a lot of people, but I think you've got some key pieces that people should be aware of.
Yeah, the first step that I'm surprised, the daunting task is I got to find a lawyer. I got to talk to a lawyer. Oh, lawyers are expensive. I don't want to like get into all of that right now. So we keep sort of kicking the can down the road and say, well, I'll get to it later. But right now, I think the simplest way to do it without feeling overwhelmed or feeling this sort of apprehension of hiring a lawyer and paying a lot of fees is write it out yourself. Take inventory of your assets. This involves your physical assets like your property, your vehicles, your bank accounts, your investments, any digital assets like cryptocurrency. Just write it
Mm,
down on an Excel spreadsheet or a piece of paper, whatever you have. Now identify the debts you have, the loans that you have, the mortgages you have, the credit card balances that you have. And now look at that as a second column. Then come up with some sort of a draft on what your distribution would look like of your assets should you pass on. Who gets what to simplify
mhm,
it? If you are younger and you have children, uh, in case of a mishap or an event that happens in life and you're no longer here, it's important for you to appoint who will be your executor, who will handle your affairs, who will be the guardian of your children. And these are difficult conversations to have, but it's so important. And you don't want to leave your children without some sort of security or guardianship if something should happen to you. Keeping all of this organized, easily accessible, copies given to your trusted executor, friend, family, whoever it may be, just ensures that there's some readiness there if some unexpected event occurs. And review everything you're doing on a regular basis because a lot of things change in life. Assets change, debts change, relationships will change, and your preferences over time may change
mm.
as to who gets what. So these are all important. Now, once you have outlined all of this, and it's simplified, like I said, could be on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Book a consultation with a lawyer. Often it could be the real estate lawyer that you used when you purchased or sold a home, and ask that lawyer to review your plan and ink it or type it out on an agreement, prepare a will, have it in his or her files. I make sure you let your executors, your estate, your heirs, everyone know that this is my lawyer. Should
Mm.
something happen to me, he or she has all the documentation. You may also want to put a copy of it in the safe, and you may also want to give a copy to a trusted individual that will oversee your estate should something happen to you. So by doing it in this format, it's not daunting at all. It's just a very thoughtful way of ensuring that you're not going to leave anybody confused and cause issues amongst your survivors because you didn't have a roadmap for them.
Great advice, as always, Faisal. Faisal, Thanks again for coming on the show today. Always a pleasure to have you here, and always a pleasure to learn something new as well.
Thank you for having me on, Brock.
That was Faisal Susiwala, top real estate broker, recently published author of The Real Deal, billion-dollar real estate broker, and someone who knows what he's talking about when it comes to the real estate market. Thanks to you listeners as well for joining us. You've been listening to Ask the Experts here on City News 570.